welcome back to The Goddess Show. My name is Laura Carrillo, and I'm the host and originator of The Goddess Show, a show about awakening, aligning with, and cultivating your inner goddess. My guest today for December is Karen Tate. She is our goddess, and she happens to be a goddess expert. I've been dying to find a goddess expert for the show, and she came to me very unexpectedly. Karen has written 2 amazing books on goddess, and the first one is called Sacred Places of Goddess.
Sacred Places of Goddess, 108 Destinations.
Yes, and the second one is Walking the Ancient Path.
Walking an Ancient Path, Rebirthing Goddess on Planet Earth.
Ooh, so I'm really excited to talk to Karen about her 2 books and her inspiration behind goddess. We'll be discussing goddess culture and its historical arc. And she's going to help me flesh out my personal motivation for starting the Goddess Show. So happy holidays, everyone, and welcome, Karen. Thank you so much.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and your listeners.
Yay. So let's start by, I wanted to know what was the inspiration and where your interest in goddess stems from.
Well, to be honest, it was quite unexpected because I did not grow up knowing this. It came to me, I guess you'd say, rather late in life. I lived in New Orleans, which many might not realize because of the Mardi Gras associations and things like that, but New Orleans is the Bible Belt. So the only goddess, per se, that women in the Bible Belt have as an archetype or role model is Mary. And unfortunately, you know, Mary is a little bit limited in
her virginity.
Yeah, you know, she teaches women to, you know, be rather passive, you know, and non-sexual. And of course, that doesn't leave women with an archetype that allows them to be a whole woman. Mm-hmm. So I moved to California though when I was about 30, and I discovered Isis. It was quite interesting. I answered an ad. I don't know if people might remember it, but there was this company called the Learning Annex.
Oh yeah, I know all about the Learning Annex.
And
yes.
They had a class in there about finding the goddess. Well, in hindsight...
And here in California.
Here in LA.
Yeah.
And actually it was a fluff class, you know, looking back on it now, but it was like the first seeds that started to get planted in my psyche, I guess, although I think Mary was probably the first seeds. So I learned about goddess spirituality, but really I have to give the most credit to 2 wonderful authors that I really believe started me on this path in a sincere, committed way.
Okay.
Were Merlin Stone, who passed away recently. She wrote the incredible book When God Was a Woman.
Ooh.
Yeah, it definitely go on Amazon, buy it used. I don't know if you can actually, if they're still out there new, but you can probably find an old copy. And Riane Eisler, who was still alive, and she wrote The Chalice and the Blade.
Okay.
And those 2 books proved to me that goddess spirituality was real, that there is a feminine face of God that's been swept beneath the rug purposefully, you know, and it just sort of laid out the foundation. It was a great springboard to start exploring all of this. So that's what I did. I spent the next 20 years exploring all of this from all different angles. And what I do now, you know, it's been a journey. You know, when I first started uncovering goddess, it was about exploring goddess and the importance of goddess spirituality for women, for me personally.
Yeah.
But then you start to realize the importance goddess spirituality offers the world. Because, and now I talk about it when I go out and teach, that goddess, you know, some people believe that goddess is a deity that resides in the heaven just like God, but some people maybe can't go there or go there sometimes.
Right.
But for the others, they can look at goddess mythology as role models for women, also archetypes, values and benchmarks
Yes.
for us to live in a more sustainable world. So you see, this is a really multi-layered onion, in a lot of different directions you can go with this. Whether goddess be someone that helps you empower yourself personally, or where it helps us make the world a better place.
And I do think it starts with yourself, and then it expands out into the world, because until you've healed yourself or balanced yourself out, then you can share that with others.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
You do have to be empowered from within. And when women start to see all of these feminine faces of God out there, and they realize that they were never meant to be second class or subservient, that they were meant to be equal partners in the world with men,
Right.
that changes women. It also changes men.
Yes.
And then once you've healed yourself, well, then you can look outside yourself and start helping your sisters and brothers, and be involved with political activism, spiritual activism, to help the world be a better place.
And I think even romantically, it creates a greater balance between two people, when it's not just like, a woman's role is just to be taken care of and be at home and take care of children, because obviously the world has changed so much. That is not a woman's role anymore, or at least not as the only option. That is an option, but more often than not, two people need to work and whatnot. But I think for men it's a relief, I would imagine, for women to be true equal partners with them.
I think so. I interview a lot of men and women on my radio show, Voices of the Sacred Feminine, so I sort of get this from many different perspectives, and there are women out there who choose to sort of take a back seat, and if that's their choice, that's fine. But there are a lot of women, more and more women, who want to be in partnership with a man.
Yeah.
And I think, personally, maybe the more progressive, evolved man, maybe he does want a break, He doesn't want to have to be responsible for all of it. Maybe he would like to rely on an equal partner, in the relationship. I mean, I know that's how my marriage is with my husband. And I think there are a lot of women who would appreciate that. And I think if men told the truth, maybe a lot more of them feel that way than maybe we think. Because we've been, sort of brainwashed or indoctrinated into what our roles are. Men too. They have been hurt somewhat from not having a feminine face of God. And when they realize how society could be different, how they could be different, we don't have to live in these little boxes,
right,
that society sort of, maybe sets up for us. We can be more of our authentic selves, women and men both.
Exactly. And that takes me to your two books that you've written. I'd love to hear more about Sacred Places and Goddess and 108 Destinations. Like, how did that come about?
Well, that came about in my early years discovering Goddess. It was very potent for me to actually go to these sacred places and see the sites where Goddess was revered 30,000 years ago. I mean, there are people today that think, humanity is only 6,000 years old. So imagine when they see this history at either a sacred site, an archaeological site, or in a museum, and they see that Goddess was worshipped more than 30,000 years ago.
And tell us a little bit about some of these places. Like, what is a ideal location for...
Well, that's the beauty of this. I really look at Goddess as sort of the poster girl for diversity, because not only does she have so many faces, there isn't this one God with this one face and this one way. Instead, you have goddesses across all different cultures. I like to say across continents and cultures, because that's really what it is. You can go to every continent on the face of the earth and find Goddess. And she's the Hindu tradition. She's Shinto. She's Native American. She's Greek. She's Nordic. She's Egyptian. She's Hawaiian. I mean, it just goes on and on. Goddesses are in all of these cultures. And as you travel around the world, you find her in all of these countries in what we call herstory instead of history.
Ooh,
You know,
herstory.
Yeah, it's
I haven't heard that.
juicy and delicious, you know, because you start to uncover this hidden history. And so that's what I started doing. I was lucky enough to be able to travel a good bit. And we would go from country to country. And sometimes the sacred site, sometimes we would start in a museum, for instance,
Sure.
and we would see the artifacts like the Louvre or the British Museum, just fantastic, or the Anatolian Museum in Turkey, or the museum on Crete. I mean, just incredible artifacts are out there. And so then we would go to the sacred site. Well, the sacred site could be an archaeological site where there used to be goddess temples, and sometimes still are.
Right.
And you can actually walk in these places, you know, where a goddess was revered in the past. That's such a powerful thing to, you know, because you know it's real then. You know, it's not just some picture in a book.
So then, this is where I have a question. What happened to that goddess culture where women were much more powerful? They were the medicine women. They were revered. They were respected. And then something shifted in society.
Well, there's lots of theories, and I'm sure there's not one answer. I teach a course that the Unitarian Universalist women put together, which I would highly recommend. It's called Cakes for the Queen of Heaven, and there's a whole chapter on that. And there are different theories. Some say that you know, it had to do with you know, as we became literate, we started using our left brain more than our right brain. You know, there are other theories about you know, maybe it was some sort of natural you know, weather change shifted things. There's all different sorts of theories, but we know that patriarchy did come in and sort of replace the goddess, not right away, but over thousands of years in different places. Maria Gimbutas and James Mellart talk about a site called Chateau Hayuk that they believe is some proof that we used to have in some places egalitarian societies where men and women really did live in partnership.
Yeah.
And so we look to, in Crete may have been another one, but yet there are cultures where women were not always subservient. You go to Egypt, for instance, women actually had a lot of power.
Yeah.
They could own their own assets, they could divorce their husband, and depending on where you look at on a timeline in history, you can see, especially when Christianity came along,
Yeah.
that women tend to lose ground. I might have digressed a little bit from your original question.
That's
but
actually, you've answered it quite well.
So you can go around the world in these sacred sites. I mean, I like to call museums sacred sites of Goddess because
Sure.
right there you have her history, her face.
Yeah.
You know, you have elements of her culture. Cathedrals are sacred places of Goddess because we think of Mary and Mary Magdalene as goddesses.
Right.
Quite honestly, it might be a surprise to some people, but when I look at Mary Magdalene or Mary and Jesus, I'm looking, to me in my mind, I'm looking at the sacred feminine and divine masculine, sort of that holy
the
couple
merging
of
of
partnership.
that, yeah.
Exactly.
That
you know.
kind of, you know, got sidetracked, and people, even though that was, you know, some would say that what that partnership was about, it's not how it's represented historically.
No, and let's realize, I mean, we have to give ourselves permission to create the future.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's really important. So however the past was, we can cherry pick the best ideas from the past and use them for the future to create the future we want.
Like in pagan culture where, you know, it was about the earth and women, there was a balance of male, female power, and there were medicine women. And that same culture, the church then, you know, treated as women as witches who had special knowledge, medicinal, etc. And that culture was submerged, but there was a lot a lot that we can glean from that culture, from in just even health-wise, from herbs and different
Absolutely.
ways of.
Well, we really, Christianity comes along and we end up in a thousand years of the Dark Ages, so we lost a lot of ground, and women lost a lot of ground. Women went from being equal partners, or in some cases maybe even more powerful,
Yeah.
to being subservient, to being chattel, basically. Marriage contract was little more than men's ownership of woman, just like he owned the beasts in the field, and his children. So we're talking about a lot of different concepts in a very encapsulated space, but it's sort of that's sort of how the timeline went. We went from potentially women we believe women were potentially revered early on.
Because we could bear children.
Yes, we were the life givers, and you see at first. Before science entered the picture and we didn't understand the man's role in procreation, it seemed very magical.
It was just like all of a sudden.
Yeah, women were life givers, and we could bleed without dying.
Wow.
I mean, menstrual blood,
fun.
For instance, menstrual blood was coveted because it was thought that it might be magical, it might bring immortality.
Oh.
So women had this stature and sort of were by association with Goddess. Goddess was the earth. She provided everything we needed to live. And by association, women were powerful too because they were the life givers. They had these magical gifts and this magical knowledge, that was passed along to heal ourselves. And then that all shifted, and here we are in patriarchy, but that's shifting too.
Yeah, exactly. Now, tell me a little bit about Walking an Ancient Path.
Okay, well, we're the first book, Sacred Places of Goddess.
Oh, and by the way, this is the first book, Sacred Places of Goddess, 108 Destinations, and hopefully you can see that through the glare. There we go, Sacred Places of Goddess, 108 Destinations. Beautiful book.
Yeah, that's, you can sort of be an armchair tourist and take the book and go all around the world and learning about Goddess and Goddess
use it
culture.
as a travel guide.
You can.
For Goddess.
You can use it as a travel guide. I actually tell you how to get to those places if you really intend to go there.
Yeah.
But if you don't want to leave the country, you don't have to.
Right.
And you can learn about Goddess here. But if you're living in California, especially, you can use that and do a tour of Goddess sites. Along the California coast, from Northern California down to Southern California.
No kidding.
And I talk about how New Orleans has sacred sites of Goddess, and how the Statue of Liberty is actually our political goddess.
Well.
So that's a goddess site, and there's actually historical significance for that. I didn't just pull it out of the air.
I'm like, well, it sounds good. Whatever.
In Rome, on Aventine Hill, the Romans deified virtues, and one of the virtues they deified was liberty, because liberty is such an important thing.
Yeah.
So they had Lady Libertas. So that's our political goddess now in contemporary times. But then the second book, Walking an Ancient Path, it won an award in the spirituality category of USA Books awards. This is great. This is more experiential.
Okay.
It's divided into the 4 elements in spirit. For instance, in the Earth section, I talk all about traveling to sacred sites, not as the tour guide scholar like in the other book, but I talk about the magical experiences.
Yes, that's what I like.
That we had, on taking these journeys, how it changed me or the people that were on tour with me. So then the water section is about emotions and doing ritual. The fire section is about passion and politics. Not politics out in the world, but sort of, politics.
Interpersonal.
And within our communities and things like that. Then the air section is about inspirations we get from Goddess, how we can incorporate Goddess into our life. And then the spirit section, because spirit is sort of like the the internal within. I talk a little bit about how a woman from the Bible Belt ends up being a scholar and a minister of goddess spirituality, because it's a journey. It's a journey.
That's part of your journey.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I like how you treat it elementally.
Yeah, I thought that would make it interesting, because let's face it, we are here on Mother Earth,
Mm-hmm.
and the Earth is composed of all the elements, so it's all connected.
Well, and that speaks to me just with my Feng Shui background. I treat an environment elementally, like, is there too much water here,
Mm-hmm.
or fire, or too little of one of these elements, and how to balance that out in people's homes and lives. And so I think it's really beautiful the way you use it in this writing.
Well, and you also use the elements, when we talk about our will. For instance, we're coming into the month of Bridget in January.
Mm-hmm.
And Bridget was a fire goddess, but she was also a water goddess. She has all of these wonderful sacred sites of holy wells and holy springs in Ireland.
Where does Bridget, this goddess Bridget, where does she originate?
Well, she's in Ireland. That's where she comes from.
She's an Irish goddess.
She's an Irish goddess.
Oh.
And what's interesting about her, she's actually a good bridge or transitional goddess.
Nice, a little play on words.
Yeah, because you have originally the British, the goddess Bridget, but then you have the Saint Bridget. So
Okay.
this is a place where paganism and progressive Christianity can really meet in this one archetype or this one goddess. But what I was going to tell you before about her being a water goddess and a fire goddess, well, what do you get when you put fire and water together? You get steam. And what do you use steam for? Steam pushes you forward. Steam can be inspiration,
like an engine.
motivation,
Yeah.
inspiration. So, it's just
Interesting.
another interesting little twist on what Bridget represents and how we can use her energy to, help us move forward in our life.
From a Feng Shui perspective, when you have a lot of fire and water in a room, that creates drama because, they're sort of, water puts out the fire, however, it is dramatic.
But it's, what do you do with that drama? Or do you use it in a proactive way or a reactive way?
Right.
So it's what do you do with that energy? It's creating drama, it's creating energy. Now it's up to you to control it and use it to to create good things in your life, or do you become a victim of it and just sort of get sucked into the toxic drama?
Absolutely. Well, and interestingly enough, we're both dressed in what from Feng Shui perspective, like elementally, we're both wearing fire, red, and water, black, represents water.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So
Okay.
we're dressed in a very dramatic and elementally,
And we're having fun.
powerful way. Exactly. Well, that sounds amazing. So this is your more recent book.
Yeah, that one is more recent, and since that one came out, I've been focusing a lot of my energy on my radio show, Voices of the Sacred Feminine.
Where can people find Voices of the Sacred Feminine?
Well, it's actually on Blog Talk now. It's a 2-hour show once a week, and I interview women and men where we talk about goddess from the standpoint of deity, archetype, and ideal.
Okay.
Lots of visionaries, New York Times bestseller, selling authors,
That's great.
scholars, activists. I've had some pretty notable people on
And
the show.
people can go on iTunes and download the podcast, right?
Yes.
And subscribe to the show.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to
Wow.
invite you to come on the show and talk about your Feng Shui.
Absolutely.
So I've been focusing on the radio show. I also teach a lot. I teach classes, and I'm getting ready to actually write a couple new books. I think this year.
Wonderful.
Yeah, the work is the journey is now taking me in that direction, I think.
And where will you be teaching?
Well, I teach at different places. I'll teach at the Goddess Temple down in Laguna Beach. Oftentimes people will invite me to come to their city, and I'll go to their city and teach. The Unitarian churches invite me to come teach Cakes for the Queen of Heaven or Rise Up and Call Her Name. Those are two of their curriculums. I'll just, advertise classes that I'm doing on my website, and, maybe it'll be in in a church meeting room, or maybe it'll be in my living room.
Fun.
It just depends.
Okay, all right. Well, where do you think the arc of feminine power and the rebalancing of male and female energy is now, historically?
Well, I think we're living in a very interesting time. I think things really are changing. Not fast enough for most of us, but when you think of the long timeline of history, the last few decades have really been just a tiny little blip on the screen,
Yeah.
And I think we're making incredible progress. And there are lots of signs of that. Having lost the goddess, we know that because we lost the goddess, we suffer things like domestic violence, infanticide, and political things too. If women were really considered equal to men, do you think they would really be getting less pay? Do you think we would really have men telling us what to do with our bodies? No.
Yeah, don't get me started.
That could be a whole show.
Yeah.
But the point is, people are moving out of that sort of regressive thinking. Look at what happened with the last election. The country chose not to go backwards.
Right.
I was just interviewing a wonderful guest on my show by the name of Hannah Rosen, and she's just one example of people who are out there talking about this, showing statistics. She wrote a book called The End of Men. Now, what she means by that is not the end of men, because we love our men.
Of course.
But she meant the end of male dominance. And she shows how economically there are more women graduating from college than men. There are more women becoming breadwinners of the family. And that changes things. Women gain independence. Let's face it, thank goodness we don't have to worry about losing Roe v. Wade. Women can have contraception if they need an abortion, they can get an abortion, and that's really
birth control, which
it's an economic issue, because if a woman can't control her reproductive life,
the number of children, when she's going to have those children, the kind
can she
of
go to
care
work? Can she go to school?
Yeah.
Can she compete in the workforce? All of those things are affected if she can't control her reproductive life.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we have these tools in place, and even red states like Mississippi are saying we want to keep contraception. So there's that element to it. The State Department is instituting more strings attached to foreign aid, where they want these foreign countries who take our tax dollars to help elevate the status of women in other countries.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Scandinavia, for instance, they are so far ahead of us. They have something called the 40% solution, where after their country has educated women, unlike here, where we go into debt to get education. Their governments actually pay for education, and then when women graduate from college, corporations are required to have 40% of women on the board.
Okay.
So the 40% solution puts 40% of women in leadership.
Okay.
Out there in the corporate
At
world.
least.
At least.
Yeah.
At least. And women and men do see things differently, and sometimes have different solutions to problems.
Right.
So it brings more diversity.
Yeah, I think it's good to have both sides of the coin.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So while things are changing slowly, they are changing in lots of different areas. I think to a lot of people out there, where the last moral imperative of our time was getting rid of slavery.
Right.
Well, today's moral imperative of our time is elevating women. I mean, you see women out there standing up to the Catholic Church and saying, yes, I'll be ordained. You have these women priests who are actually being ordained offshore.
And there was a time when there were women priests.
Absolutely.
And then something happened, and then they couldn't be priests anymore.
Or popes even. There were a few women popes. Look up Pope Joan.
And priests were allowed to get married at one time, and then not so much.
Yeah.
And I think it's created a lot of the issues, to be quite honest, that the church has had.
Well, it's not normal.
It's not healthy.
It's not normal. It's not healthy, and and so
unless you choose it for yourself. It's one thing if you choose that.
Yeah, and that's the whole point. You know, a person being able to choose their life, you know, in their path, and make choices.
Celibacy is specifically what we're talking about. If you choose to be celibate, that's one thing, but to have that
imposed on you
is a whole nother thing.
Is a whole nother thing, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, we are, I mean, you know, just to sort of come back to your question, I think we are definitely seeing the rise of the sacred feminine, and we're seeing it from all different nooks and crannies all around the globe. It's not just pagans. I mean, you see in Christian churches, the liturgy is changing to not just be God language, but male and female, goddess or mother, father language, all around the world, and all different, you know, little nooks and crannies. The sacred feminine, I believe, is really on the rise. Even if you look at it from ideals, you know, we're talking about, you know, having a more sharing and caring society. You know, we're talking about partnership. We're talking about negotiation. Now, not everybody yet, you know,
sure.
Don't get me wrong, but I mean, Bill Clinton recently was on David Letterman talking about you know, how in game theory we try to create these win-win scenarios. Well, that's goddess spirituality, a partnership, negotiation. When people go into negotiation, you want both people to come out with something. You want a win-win situation rather than winners and losers, because that's domination, winners and losers. And
exactly.
That's what we want to shift away from. You know, we want everyone to have abundance. You know, we have enough resources on this earth for everyone to have enough food, for everyone to have enough.
Yeah.
It just needs to be more thoughtfully distributed.
Yeah, a nice balance.
Yeah, balance, that's the key.
And, you know, I'd like to think that this, you know, we're approaching the end of the Mayan calendar this month, you know, 12/21/12. And I'd like to think that that is a significant date for a transition in, you know, universal consciousness in relation to the feminine goddess power energy, and a rebalancing of the male and female, the yin and the yang.
I think we are seeing it. You know, I think one element of that is transparency. Look at the transparency we have all around the world. And we might not always like what we see, but that also means that people are not getting away with the secrecy they once had, the domination and the oppression that used to go on. You know, people are standing up and fighting it. Look at what's happening in Egypt, all around the world, really. I think this is all part of that shift, and we'll go through growing pains, no doubt.
Sure.
But, you know, I think this is all part of, you know, maybe leading us into a world of more balance in all different areas of people's lives.
Exactly. Well, Karen, I just want to thank you so much for joining me today.
It's been fun.
It has been fun, and I think it's the perfect subject matter for this holiday episode of The Goddess Show. And can you tell people where they can contact you and reach you?
Sure. Well, the best place to reach me is my website. It's my name. It's KarenTate.com. From there, you can find my books, radio show. I have lots of podcasts up myself. I have a YouTube channel where you can see me actually giving talks.
Yay!
So there's lots of fun stuff out there that you know, I give away free, and I hope you'll, you know, take a look at.
And your books, where can people get Walking an Ancient Path?
Well, I have
and Sacred Places.
Well, I have a special on my website. If you'd like me to get a little bit of money instead of Amazon,
yeah, pay Karen.
Choose me over the multinational corporation. I have a special. You can get both books for $25 plus shipping and handling. So that's a really good price, because new, one of them alone is like $20. So you can get both for $25. But if you want to go to Amazon or your local bookstore, if it's not on the shelves, you can tell them to order it. They can. So either way, either from me or any place that sells books.
Yes, and it's a perfect goddess gift. 2 amazing books for $25.
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, and thanks everyone for tuning in to The Goddess Show. Happy holidays and blessings.